Welcome to Upticks. I'm Jake Falcon.
And I'm Corey Bittner. We're the founders of Falcon Wealth Advisors and your co-host for Upticks.
Today is our 40th episode, Knowledge Check.
We're talking about retirement tips, hidden fees, and the Kansas City Royals.
First segment of today's show, you and I are chartered retirement planning counselors, and so the majority of the clients that you and I personally meet with are retired, or they're certainly preparing to retire. So I'm kind of springing this on you a little bit, but I wanted to give our audience the number one tip. If you can only give one piece of advice on planning, investments, and emotional things to consider before you retire, what would they be? And so we'll start with planning first. So I'll let you go first. That way, if you take the one I was going to say, I'll come up with another one. But the first one is, okay, so someone's getting ready to retire and you're talking about financial planning. What is one tip you would give that person if you were just talking to them, someone said, hey, Corey, I'm getting ready to retire. What's something that I should be looking at when I'm thinking about my financial plan?
Based on your question, I'm operating under the assumption that this person already has a financial plan in place or something like that.
Well, whatever tip you want to give.
Having a financial plan is kind of an obvious one, but I think an important component of that, probably the number one tip I'd give somebody, is to make sure that you've really thought out what your expenses in retirement are going to be.
Okay, and so how would you help them prepare for that? Would you maybe give them a budget worksheet, or how do you normally coach somebody when you're talking about their retirement budget?
Sure. Yeah, sometimes people don't always know exactly what it is. Fortunately, I think not every client, but we have plenty of clients that are in a position to where they don't have to, track every nickel or every dime that they're spending on a month-to-month basis. But the idea there is, yes, we have a budget worksheet, but I don't like for it to just be some generic, well, hey, go fill this out and figure out what it looks like. I think we start with figuring out what the net income is, figuring out what the fixed expenses are, figuring out some of the stuff that they want to do in retirement that they might not have as far as expenses now too, thinking through healthcare and everything else.
Good, that's good advice. And a place that I actually usually start is I'll take our clients' current take-home pay from their employment, and I usually start the plan there. Now, I won't always do that if a client is spending more than what they're taking home, if they've got a lot of credit card debt or if they've got a 401k loan, if things are a little bit looser, then I might over budget a little bit for retirement just to be aware of that. But if they don't have much debt, I usually start with whatever they're taking home from their paycheck now. So that's good. So that's good tip number one.
What's yours?
Mine would be to make sure that you have all of your strategies lined up, whether that's healthcare. That's a big component of what we do for our clients, is make sure that they've got health insurance figured out, a plan for Social Security, when to collect it, and why. And then, are they going to work part-time? Typically, we can include that in the plan, but I don't like to bank on it. But we certainly can have that. Are you going to go sell real estate? Are you going to go work at Home Depot? Are you going to work at a golf course? Whatever that is. We certainly want to kind of have those figured out. Not so much on the emotional standpoint when I'm talking right now, but really on the financial planning piece of it. So that's good. Those are tips number one. So Corey's would be make sure you've got a retirement budget in place. And mine would be make sure that you've got all of your ducks in a row concerning some of the other components that go with retiring.
That's good. Good stuff.
All right. So for number two, I'll start first this time. I won't let you have the easy piece of it. So number two, if we're talking about investments for a retiree, what I like to make sure is that they have an adequate amount of money in bonds or cash to last them at least 5 years. And the reason I advise this for our clients is that if we go into another recession or another 2008 type environment, I want my clients to make sure that they're going to have income to live off of to weather that type of storm. So again, 5 years would be a little bit on the aggressive side. So at a minimum, I want 5 years. Ideally, I want to make sure that their portfolio, when we're talking about their investments, has at least 5 to 10, typically 10 years would be ideal. So again, that's what I'm looking at on their portfolio as far as their investments are concerned. What about you? What advice would you give?
I have a quick follow-up question to what you just said. When you say 10 years worth of income that they need, presumably you mean income from the portfolio. So basically whatever might be, what they would need to supplement maybe what they have from Social Security.
Right. If they're in their 60s and they're retiring and they're both husband and wife, they're both going to get Social Security. Yeah, exactly. So that's taken into account. Any pension income would be taken into account. So you're right. What they're going to pull from their portfolio,
Makes good
I want to
sense.
make sure we have at least 5 years, ideally 10, again in bonds or cash. What's your tip?
My tip would be to make sure that you understand how much risk it is that you're taking. Simply because of the fact that, everybody wants to own stocks when the market's doing well, but nobody wants to own stocks when the market's doing poorly. And, I've seen where a client retires, the market pulls back shortly after they retire. Maybe they have 60 or 70% of their portfolio allocated to stocks, and it goes down more than they're comfortable with.
Right.
I think thinking through and sort of even maybe modeling that out and helping somebody have a good idea of, what's the potential upside and downside. Obviously, things deviate outside of that. But just making sure somebody has reasonable expectations for what their portfolio is going to do based on how it's invested. Make sure that they're not taking too much risk. And ultimately, the goal there is so their money's not keeping them awake at night when they're looking at their account too frequently because it's up and down more than they'd like.
That's really good. So our investment tips would be understanding your risk tolerance,
Yeah.
and then making sure that you've got an adequate portion put aside there to weather any type of market volatility.
Exactly.
All right, so what about emotionally? Do you guide your clients emotionally as far as getting ready to retire? Are there some tips that you can give our audience if somebody's watching this and they're getting ready to retire or they just retired? What do you talk about emotionally with your clients?
I would say if they're preparing to, so there's a lot that we talk about. If somebody's preparing for retirement though,
This is one tip.
I would tell them to make sure that they have an idea of what they want to spend their time and energy on when they're not going to work every day anymore. Simply because of the fact that a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, identify with their careers and their jobs. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong
That's a
with
big
that.
deal. A lot of people do that.
As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing wrong with that. However, if that's not there anymore, what is it that you're doing? And
So it's Friday, 10 o'clock, and you're not going to Honeywell anymore or Kansas City Power and Light or wherever you work. What are you doing?
Exactly. And just like you said last week on our show, I think it was last week, it might have been the week prior, but when we were talking about this and thinking about retirement, like if somebody's going to retire, let's say the end of the year, right? December 31st is their last day. You might have dreams of all the stuff you want to do, but this year, the first 2 or 3 months of the year were freezing cold.
Whoa, you're taking my tip now. You had one tip. So your one tip is what are you going to do versus going to work, right?
That's it.
So again,
Cut it off there.
My tip is think about seasonality, right? Because it can be depressing if you retire in the winter in the Midwest and there's nothing to do. So I think what I've seen with my clients, and again, we've worked with a lot of people. We've helped a lot of people retire.
Yep.
The ones that transition the best from work to retirement are that they've got those first few months mapped out. Jake, I'm going to go to Hawaii 2 weeks after I retire, or I got a job offer. This is my dream job. It's not going to pay me much, but it's doing what I think is very important or purposeful. The people that struggle, they retire maybe in the winter and they don't know what they're going to do, and they have their identity wrapped up in their careers, and they haven't really thought about it from an emotional standpoint. They could have all the money in the world, but again, they might be miserable in those first months because they're having a little bit of difficulty with their purpose and their identity. So again, our tips are know what retire to something versus from something, and then I would suggest having an emotional plan set up. What are you going to do? And again, I don't expect you to have the next 30 years of your life mapped out,
right?
But it's like, okay, Corey, I'm going to retire on May 1st, and this is what I'm looking to do those first 2 or 3 months. Or and maybe it is, I want to do nothing.
Right.
For 3, and that's okay too, because at least you kind of have a plan. You know what? I'm going to watch The Price is Right every day.
Sure.
That's what I'm going to do. And then after that, I'm going to start my day. Whatever it is. But I think just having some sort of framework or some sort of mental focus or whatever you want to call it will make retirement that much more pleasant, certainly as you're beginning it.
That's good. Sorry to steal some of your
time. One tip.
One
Corey.
tip. I didn't follow rules very well there.
All right, fair enough.
Instructions, I should say.
All right, so let's move along to our second segment of today's show, and we wanted to talk about hidden fees. I've been getting a lot of feedback out there from our clients talking to other individuals who may have been sold a house of cards, or in my opinion, just outright lies. A lot of advisors out there will do one or two things. They'll either discount their fees to try to retain a client or win the business, or they'll hide the fees from the client so the client doesn't really truly know what they're paying. So the first thing I want to talk about is that when you're looking to work with a financial advisor, cost should definitely play a role, but it shouldn't be the deciding factor. For example, you can go to McDonald's and you can get a burger for $1, I think. I don't know. I don't eat there. But I mean, can you get a burger for $1 at McDonald's?
I think so.
Right? But you're getting processed meat, I'm sure. I don't know where it's from. And you're getting the standard fast food, probably not the most healthy choice.
Well, I think you're paying for something that's quick and convenient.
Right. Or you can go out to, Whole Foods and maybe get grass-fed beef and make yourself a good burger. Or you could go to, Seasons 52 or Capital Grill or, a nice restaurant and get better service, better quality ingredients, just an overall better evening versus going to McDonald's at 7 o'clock and going through the drive-thru. Now, does it make either of them bad? Absolutely not. But it just makes them different. And so if an advisor is bad-mouthing another advisor and telling you they're overcharging you or their fees are too high, you shouldn't be paying that much, you have to be careful and you have to understand that they may be saying that to you just to strike an emotional chord in you and provide some fear or greed or whatever they're doing, but it's a sales tactic. That's all it is. It doesn't mean an advisor is better or worse. In my opinion, you get what you pay for. If you want, if you value the relationship, transparency, education, sometimes you have to pay a little bit more for that, But if you want somebody that's just going to discount the heck out of their fees, you've got to understand what you're getting. I mean, Charles Schwab recently came out and they announced that for $30 a month, you can have access to a financial advisor. If it were me and I had a couple $1 million, do I want to call some call center where I have some kid answering the phone that doesn't know anything about me? To me, that's not worth it, right? But to some people that is, and that's why they're providing that solution. So do you have anything you want to add before we kind of flip over into hidden fees? But I wanted to get your take on what do you think when other brokers are out there? I call them brokers because that's a sales tactic. I don't think a fiduciary advisor would be looking to compete on price.
I have a lot of thoughts, but to kind of consolidate them, I think first off, in my opinion, it's a shame that we even have to have this conversation, right? That we have to talk about these things because of the way that some people in our industry act. Mm-hmm. And given the way that some people act, I understand at times why people have the perspective of the wealth management, financial advisory industry as a whole, because how often do you meet with a prospective client who unfortunately was burned by someone in the past?
Yeah.
It happens way too often.
Right.
So the fact that we even have to talk about this is frustrating to me because I do know the value that can actually be added by a good advisor who's being open and honest, who's taking the time to give somebody an idea of the service that they can provide and actually listen to what somebody needs. I think that's invaluable, frankly, and I think a lot of people are looking for that and find that to be an invaluable resource also. But unfortunately, there's people that prey on that in some ways.
Right.
And there's people that lie, and there's people that will make things up, and there's people that will tarnish somebody's name or reputation for no reason at all other than to try to make a sale.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, and I don't want to say that those people are necessarily bad people because I think they are trying to probably do what's best for their clients, but I think they're a little bit delusional, and I think they convince themselves and they associate with their egos so much that they are just convinced that
they're right.
Yeah, they're the only one that can do it right, and the fees should be cheaper, and it's absurd. You should only pay an advisor $100, and all of these things or whatever. And I think it's just a lot of ego and a lot of again being delusional. So again, it is sad. It's the industry's full of salesmen, and that's why you've got Bernie Madoff out there, and you've got all these bad people that have ruined people's financial lives, and you just want to be careful. I mean, you can also go buy a clunker of a car for cheaper than you can buy something nicer, but you don't do that, right? Or you could live in a shack, right, with no running water in an outhouse, right? But you don't choose to do that. So why would you discount a professional when you're looking for a financial advisor? Why would you discount that and just try to pay the cheapest price out there? Right. To me, it's a little silly on the consumer's part. Is like if you're shopping for advisors and you're going to go with the one that's cheapest. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. Typically, it means it's the worst, in my opinion. If you get what you pay for. I firmly believe that.
Right. Well, and I think fees are an important part of the relationship, right? It's good to understand what the costs are going to be. But with that being said, it shouldn't, like you said, it shouldn't be the only determining factor. And it doesn't mean that somebody has to discount their fees down to virtually nothing, because if they're actually doing their job and adding good value, the clients are happy to pay for that.
Right.
So let me mute this so that doesn't happen again.
All right, so I'll go on to my next portion here. So we talked about, okay, so advice here on the investment side is I wouldn't go with the advisor that's going to quote unquote discount your fees or charge you the less. That's not how you should be making your decision. Your decision should be based on competency, right? At least for Corey and I, we further our education and we were chartered retirement planning counselors, so it's a big deal. I would look at background record. You can pull us up, all of us, on BrokerCheck and look and see if there's any disclosures. And then a process that you can understand, right? So the advisor should have a repeatable, definable process. And then a relationship. I think that's a big part. You're going on this retirement journey with an individual. You've got to trust them and they've got to trust you. And I think those are really more important factors than price.
That's good.
Now, a lot of advisors out there also, so the ones that are looking to compete on price, they're typically the ones that are somewhat spineless, in my opinion. Maybe that's a bold word.
No, it's true.
Well, maybe I shouldn't use the word spineless. I take that back. I just think that they also hide their fees a lot. And so, they'll tell you that a bond is free, or that they'll put you in mutual fund products or exchange-traded funds, which are both products, and not disclose what those internal fees are. So again, I'm not saying that mutual funds are bad. I'm saying that the consumer needs to be educated to know what they're paying.
Agreed.
Right? And so a typical mutual fund will charge you 1%. So if your advisor says in writing, I'm going to charge you 1%, you've got to go to the next step and say, okay, you're putting me in these investments. What do those investments charge me?
Yes.
And that's a big problem. That's a huge problem.
Understanding, sorry to cut you off, but if that's what the advisor says, I'm charging you, you have to know, well, what other costs associated with me working with you do I need to know about?
Right. And so it's an easy question. The sad reality is it's not reported on your statements. So you can't just pull up your brokerage statement from the bank that's holding your assets and know what all of your fees are. You have to go and do your due diligence. And again, I think the responsibility is twofold. The advisor should be transparent. They're not, and they should be. And the way they get around this is that the mutual fund will send you a prospectus in the mail, which is this huge legal document that nobody ever reads.
Right.
And in there buried the fees. And then two, shame on the consumer, right? You don't want to blindly just go into a relationship and not know what you're paying. When I make a major purchase or I enter a relationship with somebody, I figure out, what are they going to charge me?
Yep.
If it's coming out of my account, I want to know what it is and why. I talked on our last episode, the travel agent didn't charge me. Now, was it shame on me? Maybe a little bit of how she was paid, but again, the fees weren't coming out of my pocket, to my knowledge. But that's an example that maybe I should have been more diligent and said, how exactly are you getting paid and what are you getting paid? And that would have been a fair question. But this was a transaction. It was a one-time deal, so it didn't bother me. But when you're engaging in a relationship with a financial advisor, it is an ongoing relationship, and there will be ongoing fees, and you certainly should be made aware of what they are. So again, I take back my comment. It shouldn't probably use the word spineless. That's too bold in my opinion.
That's fair.
But
it's a little fired up. That's all right.
But I'm just saying, as a consumer, you should know exactly what you're paying. And the way we do it, for our clients at Falcon Wealth Advisors that we work directly with, we buy stocks and bonds. We don't charge hidden fees. The clients don't pay us any hidden fees, and the fee is on the statement. And to us, that is how we are redefining financial advice. We're taking it and making it more simplistic. I think Wall Street has made the environment very muddy and in an attempt to make more money off the client.
Complex by design.
Yeah. Okay, so for our next section today, Corey, I wanted to talk about questions worth asking. So do you have a question for me that you maybe heard from a client that you wanted to bring up?
I do. So I had just this week, well, let me just pose the question this way. How about that? I'll pretend that I'm the client here.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So my question is, Jake, if this is what my current take-home income is, my spouse is still working, but I'm retired. we think we have an idea of what it is that they're going to need. We don't really know exactly what healthcare costs are going to be for both of us once we're both retired. How do we navigate that?
So this person's still working?
One person's retired, spouse is still working.
And so he asked, how do I navigate the unknown cost of health insurance?
Yes, and how do I know if we're going to be how do I know that we're going to be okay when my spouse retires?
So the conversation I would have in this instance is I would talk about, do either employers offer any type of health insurance for retirees? Mm-hmm. And that's where we kind of look at first. Also, I discussed COBRA, which is a program you can go on for 18 months after you retire. Then after that, if let's say they're in their mid-50s and they've got 10 years before they get on Medicare, then we'll go down the road of bringing in another health insurance professional and seeing what the open market looks like. The problem with that is that market is constantly changing. So what we like to do is we like to do budgeted in there, and we'll budget in $1,500 or $2,000 a month if we need to be conservative.
Yep.
So that we make sure that we have that cost accounted for. So while I'm directly not providing health insurance for our clients, we definitely want to be involved in that conversation, and we want to bring in other professionals when appropriate. That answer your question?
It's good. Yeah.
I had one for you. I had a client ask us to run a scenario. Their target return is, I think, somewhere over 6%, and they said, "Well, why don't you show me 5%?" How would you address that?
The way I would address that first is by recognizing the fact that, well, let me back up. I would explain their target rate of return that we are using in their financial plan is predicated upon how a portfolio invested that same way has performed historically. In other words, it's not like, you or I.
Some made up number, right? They understood that.
Numbers out of a hat. Yeah.
They understood that, but they wanted to see 5%.
Then I would run it at 5%, and I would show it to them and say, look, this is what, we all know what the target is, right? We've talked about that. You've wanted to see if we achieve a lower rate of return, which for the record, I don't think is what's going to happen, but in the event that it does, this is the impact that it has on your plan. Because the fact of the matter is, you and I, we can't predict the future, right? We don't know what the next 30 years look like. But if somebody wants to see what that looks like, I would show it to them. I would show it to them and explain it to them and see how they feel about it.
Yeah, that's what I did. So we ran the scenario. We showed it to them. What was kind of fun is they were a client of ours at our former firm that came over with us. Mm-hmm. And so they brought in their old review from back to 2011. So we could see how we did at our former firm. And then we actually could see how much better we're doing now, which is great. So I kind of averaged it out a little bit, and they felt very comfortable after that. And I didn't mind showing them. They were just concerned because they don't, these are some major decisions they're making, obviously, and they wanted to stay conservative. So you're right. We don't mind showing that. We don't think it's necessarily realistic, but if that helps provide you comfort, then that's okay. Right? We're not going to take offense to that.
I'm not going to say, no, I'm not going to show it.
Yeah, I'm not.
You're wrong or something like that.
We can model whatever you want. I mean, our assumptions are made off of real historical returns dating back to the 1920s with stocks in 1970s on the bond. So we feel very confident in our assumptions. But again, if you want to see something ran differently, then that's completely your prerogative, and we're happy to show that. We're going to try to make that client, though, 6 or 7%. And that's what our strategy is designed to do in this instance. But it didn't hurt my feelings showing her 5%, or the husband and wife 5%.
That's good.
Good answer. All right. So now for our fun topic, I wanted to talk about your Kansas City Royals baseball team, or my Kansas City Royals baseball team.
Sure.
So as of the recording of the show, they're 2-4.
Correct.
You said they're the bottom in the AL Central, or are they in the West?
Central.
AL Central. So what are your thoughts on the team so far?
I haven't watched many games, but just from following along with it, I've found that I think a lot of people have found that they're kind of fun to watch and exciting.
Because they're fast?
Yeah, they have speed. They have talented players on, they have talented defenders. So the defense is good. Guys are stealing bases. They're sort of back to the sort of small ball that I think helped them win the World Series. When the rest of baseball is sort of moving toward 3 true outcomes is what they call it, where it's a player either strikes out, he walks, or he hits a home run. There's less of the single, double, triples. So anyway,
let me talk about this though real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So let me talk about this. So the Royals reached out to me, and they wanted me to buy Crown seats, right? And we're already into the season.
Right.
So I don't know if something happened, I trust, I don't know if it did or not, right? Hope, I don't know if I say hope, but, I don't know what happened to the season ticket holder,
That was locked in.
Right. I don't know if they, again, I don't want to speculate, I trust everything's okay, but I found it interesting that the Royals, 2 or 3 years ago were very proud of their Crown seats.
Right.
And, they kept spiking the prices and gouging people, in my opinion. And now that the product is less, then they're basically reaching out. And I wouldn't say they're begging for people to buy tickets, but they certainly shouldn't be having to call people when the season's already started to try to sell them season tickets.
Right.
The Chiefs don't do that,
No.
I'm sure. And I just found it pretty interesting. And then I was taken aback a little bit because I'm like, look, I'm a financial advisor, and I think they know that. Maybe they don't. But I said, I would be interested, but I'm not just going to write you a check or whatever. This wasn't in my budget. So I would prefer to pay you in installments, and they wouldn't do that. They wanted the money up front. So it's like, are they that hard up for money? I mean, I would think that if I signed an agreement and was going to pay them over the season, they would get their tickets, or they would sell their tickets, they'd get the money, and everyone would be happy. I mean, are they that? I just found it pretty interesting that, and so this is what I was going with your point, is that, yeah, that may be a fun team to watch, but don't you think it would have been worth it to keep Moustakas and Hosmer and some of the guys that helped us win the World Series so that they had a good product so they could sell more tickets?
Yeah, it's almost like a chicken and egg type of thing, right? And everybody's going to have a different opinion.
And I was listening to ESPN Kansas City last night, and I thought this was pretty interesting that the Royals always call, well, we are rebuilding. And you're a St. Louis Cardinals fan. The Cardinals never rebuild.
No, you're right. And
they're always good.
And that's been their thing, is that they've wanted to, they've missed the playoffs the last 3 or 4 years, I think. But,
okay.
But in those 3 or 4 years, they've still won, they've been at 500? Or above 500.
Right. There's a good product on the field there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if rebuilding is the smartest thing to do, is my point, for baseball teams. Like, maybe it's just different strategy, but like some of these teams, that's what they were arguing, is that St. Louis's market is not LA's. So it's not like St. Louis is some type of market that Kansas City can't compete with financially.
Correct. No.
So why is St. Louis always pretty darn good and the Royals have to go through these, peaks and valleys?
Yeah. Sadly, I think the answer is probably some level of greed, obviously.
Do you think it's ownership greed?
Yeah. I think they could have easily signed Lorenzo Cain and Moustakas.
Yeah, Cain was the other guy.
Yeah.
And Moose isn't even making that much, is he?
Aren't
we paying that O'Hearn guy more than Moose? I don't know if they were joking, but they said that last time, and I don't know if that was serious or not.
So check this out. So when Moustakas was after his contract with the Royals was done, he was made what's called a qualifying offer.
Right.
Where he was offered $17 million for the next season.
From the Royals?
From the Royals.
That's a lot of money for the Royals to pay somebody.
Right, and then if they decline it, which players have historically almost always declined those, they go to free agency, they get a long-term contract and earn a lot more money, but the team that signs that player has to give up a draft pick to the team that offered the qualifying offer. That's why teams do it. So anyway, Moustakas, walked away. He said no thanks to the qualifying offer, presumably with some confidence because he was coming off of 2 great seasons.
Right.
And then he ended up hitting free agency. The market was so, cold that he had to come back to the Royals and ended up signing a 1-year contract with them for $6 million. So he turned down a $17 million contract and came back and had to accept a $6 million contract.
Fire your agent.
Yeah, I know. And then...
Don't you fire your agent in that?
Probably. And I think that Scott Boras maybe is his agent too.
He's fired.
Who's one of the most renowned agents. Either way, yeah. And then he signed a 1-year contract. My point is, then he went and signed a 1-year contract with Milwaukee for like $10 million.
Where's he at now?
Milwaukee. So he could make a little bit more money with incentives, but basically it's going to take him 2 seasons of playing to earn what that qualifying offer would have been. So my point in bringing all of that up is, 1, I think it's interesting because what a rough deal for Moustakas, but 2, the Royals could have easily just signed him. Same thing with Lorenzo Cain, who's also with Milwaukee. Because they didn't,
I think
They had their season. They had to sell the farm to win the World Series, so they did the right thing there. But it was just so widely accepted that they were just going to have to let all these free agents walk, when in reality is they didn't. They could have chosen to sign some of them. Everybody just knew Royals ownership wouldn't.
Yeah, and again, the point of this segment is not to badmouth the Royals. I just don't understand some of their moves. Like, I don't understand why they, I trust everything's okay with the season tickets, but why would they need their money up front?
I don't know.
And why did they dump all their players and they're rebuilding? And the question is, are they trying to even win games?
Oh, I don't know. Some of the teams, I don't know about the Royals specifically, that are openly tanking really aren't. They're not trying. They're not even trying to win, which is a problem.
That is a problem. So maybe they need to do it like Premier League soccer and shrink the league and have the Royals would be a minor league team. Yeah. If you're not gonna go all in and try to win, I'm not suggesting the Royals are doing this, but I don't know. What are you doing? I mean, I think, I don't know, if I were, I'm not an owner of a major league club, but I mean, if I were, I think the product is what's important.
Yeah.
For the fan, and that drives jersey sales, ticket sales, concession sales. I mean, TV, you get paid. I mean, it's all, no one's going to want to go to, I don't know.
Well, I think the last thing I'll say is you made a good point. You made an interesting point about how much they raised the season ticket prices when the team is doing really well.
Yeah.
To me, that's like if, relating that to what we do, if we raise clients' fees when the market did really well.
Right.
And then it goes down and it's like, well, I need your fee up front.
Right.
It wouldn't make you feel good.
Yeah, exactly. If I asked a client, I need you to pay all your fees up front, they would look at me like, what? What is wrong with you? Are you that hard up for cash?
Yeah. Right.
That's why I took it. It was like, what do you mean you need it all up front? We're not talking about a lot of money here. It's a lot of money to me, but it's not a lot of money to the Royals organization.
Right.
So, anyways, but I'll still cheer for them. It's hard to watch. It's hard to watch them. It's hard to watch them lose.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope they can get it. I hope they can stay around 500.
Sure.
That would be a fun deal. But we'll see. I think their relief pitching is the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
What I've gathered,
that's not fun to watch.
I think the bullpen's already blown several games.
Yeah, that's not fun.
And they're 6 games into the season.
Yeah, that's not fun to watch. You don't want that in there. So anyways, but that's all the time that we have for today's show. Thank you again for tuning in as always. Please feel free to like and follow us out there on all of our various social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Certainly this is our YouTube channel. Please like and share our content and subscribe. And you can find me personally on Twitter at Jake Falcon CRPC.
And you can find me at Corey Bittner KC.
Thank you all for watching, and we hope you have a great week.